Drug Tone Audio. Check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Sends and Suffers podcast. I am your host, Mario Stanley. Today, we have the man, the myth, and the legend, Mr. Jeff Jackson, on the episode. I cannot tell you how excited I am. This man is a Texas living legend and probably single-handedly the best gift that Texas has ever given to rock climbing, maybe even to the world. I don't know. That's a tall order, but if you know of him, you know I would say that. Before we just jump into this episode, I want to thank everyone for liking, following, and subscribing so much. This podcast has been growing, and it's only by your love and support. And if you guys haven't already, please check us out on the Patreon. We have launched the Sends and Suffers podcast Patreon. You can join, be in the know with all the details, extra bonus reels. We're dropping some bonus reels from the previous episode 23 with Kaya on there real soon. I cannot wait to interact and connect with you guys. And yes, we are still mailing out stickers. We're still doing that. However, there is a little bit of a hiatus on that. We're working on production issues. Those will happen. And yeah, but that's enough of me rambling. Let's go ahead and get into the episode with Mr. Jeff Jackson. Enjoy, because I already am now. All right, we're good. Yeah.
Aloha.
Nice. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sends and Suffers podcast. I'm your host, and today is a pretty rad day. I have Jeff Jackson here with us, and this is a funny thing. If you have been climbing over 15 years, I feel like your name is well known. If you haven't been climbing over 15 years, you live in Colorado, someone's definitely climbed on your routes. Or Mexico.
Well, I thought you were going to say if you haven't been climbing 15 years, you have no idea who the hell this is.
Well, I mean, that's probably
what
true.
it is.
But I think more people have touched your work than know who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest thing. So in a previous podcast, I was talking to my buddy Wolverine, Justin, and he's a flight medic in Grand Junction. And we were just talking about you, and someone had asked us a couple of days ago, like, where do you think most routes come from? And we were both dropped your name simultaneously. It was like, the man is prolific. It's like I believe you have white blood cells and bolting blood cells that run around. But I'm not going to assume that everyone listening to this knows who you are. So if you wouldn't mind, who are you, where you're from, and what is your connection to the outdoors?
Let's see. Well, I'm from here. I'm from Dallas area. Grew up in north of Dallas in a little town called Parker, Texas. And I learned to climb just by kind of making it up back in 1977. Got in trouble at school for playing hockey in the bathroom with like a little puck thing that we pulled off a urinal. And my punishment was to write a book report. And I had to write a book report. And so I went to the library there in Plano, Texas, and picked out a book called In High Places. And it was about a guy, Dougal Haston, who's a climber. And I was like, shit, this is interesting stuff, man. This is like the best thing going outside of war. When you're in sixth grade, you're like, shit, it's too bad there's no war going on, because then I could shoot guns and stuff. But climbing was the next best thing. And, little did I know, would go out to a railroad trestle, kind of on Renner Road. For those people who know that area, there's a railroad trestle there that was made out of flagstone and cement, and we'd use cold chisels and kind of make our own climbs. And I read Royal Robbins' Basic Rockcraft and kind of made it up with my buddy Keith Wright, who was also from the area. And then we started going to Oklahoma and climbing on Dwayne Raleigh's routes up in the Wichitas. Another extremely prolific kind of progenitor of the sport for all of us that grew up around here. Yeah. And a big mentor for me as well.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Dwayne and I go back till, I think I met him in like 70s. We were camped out at his area, which is Quartz Mountain up in the Wichitas.
I love that place.
And this guy came up. He was with his girlfriend, and a friend of mine is like, I really wish I could meet that Dwayne Raleigh guy. He must be 10 feet tall, the way that he places the bolts. And, I just don't believe he did all those climbs, and just going on about that. And the girl with Dwayne goes, well, this is Dwayne right here. So we got busted for like talking shit on Dwayne in front of his girlfriend. And that was the first time I met Dwayne. And
That's awesome.
I learned to climb on his routes. And then if I'm known for anything, it's probably as the editor of Rock and Ice for about a decade.
Yeah.
And I've written over 500 published pieces for Rock and Ice and Climbing Magazine and Ascent and different magazines as well, like At Large Magazine, and different magazines mainly about adventure sports and about climbing.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also partnered with John Long, and we did 3 screenplays for a Hollywood producer called, his name is Steve Schwartz. And his company is Chalkstone Pictures.
I'm familiar with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they did the movie The Road, and Tree of Life, and a bunch of Brad Pitt films. And
I did not know that.
Good production company.
Yeah, I was about to say The Road is an amazing, amazing movie.
Yeah, it really is. It's a good production company. So those are my main mentors, would be Dwayne Raleigh and John Long.
Okay.
And those are the guys that kind of brought me up, and that's who I am, because I really think we define ourselves through the relationships we have with other people.
Yeah, I would agree.
Climbing. I would be nothing without my friends, my partners. I put up a lot of routes, but couldn't have done any of them without help from my buddies.
I would immensely agree with that statement. I think that, it's funny, like in the climbing gyms, it's different because, bouldering is the most commonly done thing in the climbing gym.
Sure.
And it's this kind of this weird thing. It doesn't force, it allows people to continue this kind of antisocial nature.
Uh-huh.
And I've noticed that climbing is very different from when I came up, because I came up in early 2000s, like that's really early 2000s, late 90s is like, I would say I heard of rock climbing because like someone had asked me a while back, I was like, when's the first time you ever heard of rock climbing? I was like, before I ever rock climbed, living in Virginia, I just remember walking into a Barnes and Noble looking at a magazine, and I was looking for a lowrider magazine, and I saw a climbing magazine. I was like, oh, this white people shit. I'm not doing that.
You got to be crazy to do that.
Yeah. And lo and behold, moved to Texas, meet some good friends, Kenzie Davis, Jared Staines, I met Kyle, met a bunch of people, Kim Puccio, Clint Scales. And it was climbing that honestly really kind of like helped solidify me in my personal time of like kind of, I don't know, like coming into my manhood, coming into my own. And so climbing was really important for me in that. But when I started climbing, it was always who you were climbing with. It was always the partners that you had, the crew, the circle that you have. And now I feel, and I'm guilty of it too, because I use climbing more. It's so commercialized now that I can use it as a legitimate form of fitness, that I can just put my headphones on and just kind of do my thing.
Training, cruising.
Yeah, you can get away with that. But I think it's very romantic, as how you just talked about your relationships with people. And one thing I would like to kind of talk to you about is your bolting and is your routes. I want to just briefly touch on that, but like,
sure.
I have climbed more of your routes and I've cursed your name more than I can think about. Like, I think the last time I was like, what in the, like, I remember it now. I was climbing with Will Brock, and we were up near Lizard Lake, and we were climbing on low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And I was just remember getting on this thing, and I was like, what crack cocaine have you been smoking to do this thing? And I think it's very important that people understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are an Iyengar master too in yoga.
Oh gosh, I would not put the word master after that.
You're a baller in yoga. Let's take master out of the equation,
I'll
but you're a veteran in yoga.
Baller. No, I did study Iyengar yoga with another guy, Christian Levy, and that's an interesting. He is an Iyengar master. The guy's a badass yogi, And interestingly, that came through climbing as well, because he got into climbing and he really wanted to do some bigger routes and learn and progress as a climber. So he offered to trade me yoga for climbing. And so we did Half Dome together. We did Big Walls and Potrero together, long trips. And then we also, I moved into his back house, his garage apartment, and we went deeply into the study of yoga, not just yoga, but the 8 limbs of yoga, including pranayama. We'd get up at 4 a.m. to do breathing exercises. We studied, I mean, an immersive study for a few years into yoga and all of the aspects of it. Not just asana, not just the movements, but the meditation, the contemplation, the concentration, the breathing practices, pranayama, and then the asana as well. And so Christian was an Iyengar, boss, and he guided me into that practice really deeply. Christian Levy would go to India and study with Mr. Iyengar and Mr. Iyengar's daughter Gita and his son. I think Prashant is his name. And each year, for a couple of years, he would leave, and he was in Austin, Texas at first, and then he was in Golden, Colorado, where he still is today. And so I would go up and take over his classes and teach his classes, as well as then teaching from about 1988 or so till 2005 when I left Austin for Colorado.
Okay, I was wondering. I was about to ask you for a timestamp on that, so that makes a lot of sense. And my buddy Will really attests like your devotion and your dedication to that craft, and I guess to like your ability to climb, because he was like, he's watched you rock climb before, and he was just like, it's obvious. He was like, in classic Will Brock voice, he's like, bro, it's like it's obvious that his mastery at yoga makes his climbing better. And I was curious, like, is that actually? And I didn't realize it was such a wide scope that you learned. So are there any particular things within each one of those disciplines, or was it kind of like all encompassing, like climbing is all encompassing, that improved your climbing? Or I guess that's the simplest way. Did any of that improve your climbing, open it up, or give you kind of a different perspective, or allow you to achieve bigger and better things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's, as climbers, we're always looking for things to make us better climbers, and what's the path. And I'd say that there's 3 aspects that come to mind. And I also have a friend, Alex Catlin, who is a first ascensionist down in Mexico. I did a bunch of climbing down at Petro Chico and in northern Mexico as well. And Alex was one of my partners down there, and one of the first guys to go down there and discover all that. And he was a prolific traveler. And so at one point, I'd been climbing for 20 years or something. I've been climbing for 43 years, something like that. And then, 20 years in, I was kind of like, how am I going to get better? And flexibility came with the yoga.
Mm-hmm.
The strength comes with, I was a pole vaulter through college. I ran track, went to college and did that, and developed a lot of strength and a lot of gymnastics, sort of that kind of strength.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Flexibility was yoga. And then the other missing aspect was like, what can I do, Alex? And he's like, travel, so it's like strength, flexibility, and just travel, just seeing other places, getting on other routes, other kinds of rock types, widening your, experience and and I think that was really wise for Alex to point out that that's an integral thing. But yoga is especially good because it develops not only that flexibility, but the ability to lift that leg and hold it at extension. It's strength and flexibility. And then the best thing I think that yoga does is it offers an active recovery. Certain kinds of yoga maybe are more intense, like the Ashtanga styles, Vinyasa. But an Iyengar style, which is longer holding of postures, a real focus on structural alignment, the use of props, these like aspects of Iyengar yoga make it especially suited for recovery,
I didn't
which I
know
think
that.
is a missing element for many of us who just like to climb, and we neglect that essential stage of recovery, which I think is where yoga really shines.
Pro tip: I'm stealing that beta because like Ashtanga and I guess Vinyasana, or whatever else you just said, I'm
Yeah.
terrible at them. So, but I think those are like the most popular kinds. And I always feel like when I go to yoga, I'm always like just so wiped out
Yeah.
even more that I'm
Get your
just,
ass kicked,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazingly hard. But I want to back up for a hot second because you touched on something that like struck a big chord with me. And I remember the largest jump in my climbing is when back in the day of old school Dallas Rocks days, I used to close down the youth program for the whole summer and I would just hit the road. And
Yeah.
for 5 or 6 summers, I have a 40 Econoline van. I bought that thing with, I think I had 102,000 miles on it. The engine crapped out last year. It has 498,000 miles on it. I rode that thing into the ground, but I got so strong climbing on such different varieties of rock. And one of my things, the biggest compliment I've ever received from someone climbing, they're like, you read, you assess, and then you do. There's none of this like real hesitation. But he's like, but my buddy is like, but you don't think you're that strong of a climber. He's like, but I think you are. And the thing that I've always expressed to him is like, when you climb enough different stone, the best way I can describe it is it's like studying different. It's like I have a friend who can paint and he can copy anyone's artwork. He's amazingly good. But he said, he's like, until you see enough pieces, until you try to mimic these things, you can't do it. But like he can replicate art so good. So good.
Right.
And I think this is kind of a weird backwards way to correlate it. But I think climbing is the same way. It's like once you try a ton of different stone, your mental ability allows your strength and everything else to jump and go forward. And I think I was very puzzled when you said travel. And once you like put the glue together, that makes so much sense.
It does. It made sense to me when Alex was talking about it. And then I tried to do that. I tried to get out there and really get all around the world. And I've always really just enjoyed mostly the intimacy that happens when you're putting up a first ascent. So I've been all over the place. I generally climb on my own routes that I put up, which is, it's not the best way to get strong, but
It is what
one
it
time I
is.
was in the Yukon with Kurt Smith and Scott Cosgrove. We did a climb on proboscis called Yukon Tiers. It was pretty cool, like a 24 pitch line. And we were looking at the wall. We had just helicoptered in and like, well, maybe we should do Skinner's route. Todd Skinner and Paul Dana had done a route called the Great Canadian Knife. And it was kind of a bolted sport climb. And it was, hard but proud. And Kurt said, I was talking to Jim Bridwell, another kind of legend, dude. And he said, never travel this far, spend this much money to do somebody else's climb. I took that to the bank, and I don't ever do anybody else's routes if I can help it.
Yeah.
Too hard, man. On sighting's too hard.
Yeah. No, I can agree with you on that one, dude. So
Travel's important.
And you correct me if I'm wrong, but now, did you write the original or did you co-write the original Texas Limestoner?
Yeah, I wrote Texas Limestoner.
Okay.
Yeah, me and a guy named Kevin Gallagher put it together. I wrote all of it, and Kevin and I compiled it and got it published and went in together to pay the cost.
Nice.
He helped draw the topos, and again, your partners are an integral part. But I wrote all the words and all that to those old guidebooks.
Yeah, I have that book, so I like this
Texas Limestone. Yep,
yeah,
Texas
that's
Limestone
probably
too.
my one guilty pleasure. I collect guidebooks, and I just have a ton of them. And I think that's like definitely my pastime when I want to just like get my psych high. I'll just pull up. Now, did you write 1 and 2, and
Yes.
just every single one?
Yeah, I wrote all 1 and 2. Those were the only guides to Texas, Central Texas, for a long time. And then after that, some other folks came. John Hogue, I think, has a more recent guidebook.
Yeah. I think right now, from what I understand, the only comprehensive guidebook that's coming out is by Matt Dendy
Okay.
and a few other people, but it's all bouldering. It is
Oh, I
just
see.
because bouldering has exploded
Right.
in Texas, just because there's so much. I think people are finally finding a lot of the riverside bouldering that's just been sitting around forever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I go to Mountain Project and I see a lot of lines that me and Rick Watson and my buddies back in Austin did back in the day, like the Spear Point or whatever. And there, it's like first ascent unknown.
You need to fix that. Or do you
Hell,
even care?
who knows? I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care. Some Tonkawa Indian probably went. Native American went.
That's-
like,
If we're going to be honest about it, yeah.
those guys were probably out there playing around and sending everything back in the days.
Oh my God.
Giving people credit for first ascents is iffy.
So let's touch on that actually, because I kind of briefly talked to you about this, and for those of you guys who are listening, I have mentioned this project that I'm working on, and we will not get into the depths of this here, but there will be a future podcast coming on to this. But I've been working on trying to expand and open areas that are existing in Texas, but there's a lot of credit given to first ascensionists, and people, I feel like, and me, I try to avoid this. So I mean, just like, I want to make that very clear. Like, but I feel like people, first ascensionists have either wanted or people try to put them in the same category as like Alex Hano, Chris Sharma, like these gods that live on Mount Olympus, and the rest of us are just mere mortals that are trying to catch up. And people look at first ascensionists the same way. And I've met first ascensionists that want that same credit and want that same notoriety. And to me personally, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, the route is the same no matter what. Like the rock is the rock. It's not changing anything. You just sunk some bolts into it and just made it fun for other people to be able to get on. But I guess the question I'm trying to ask is this: do you feel that that is something that is done, like a lot of credit is given to first ascensionists, or if someone's two questions. If you feel like too much credit or a lot of this is given into first ascensionists, and if someone wants to get into bolting and into establishing it and be someone who opens up route, what is, and I'll repeat this question, but what do they need to have going into this in their mind and their heart and their gut? Because I feel like people want it because of notoriety and ego and a legend. And I think that is the wrong reason to get into it, because you're going to get someone hurt over the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is, kind of lost my own train of thought here.
Let me just that's great. There's a lot there and we can unpack it, a little bit slowly. But one thing that just stood out to me, as a first ascensionist, first of all, the reason that I do first ascents in the beginning was in 1977, there were no routes to climb. There was Dwayne's routes and in the Wichita's, there was James Crump and crew at Enchanted Rock, and that was the only climbing around. So in order to just have things to climb, no gyms, I just got into that. Now, then I started to discover, wow, there's just so much fun, first of all, and so much like intimacy, involved in that. You get there and you toothbrush off the climbs and you get closer to the holds in the rock. And then there's the exploration involved in it, finding the trail in, rigging a safe anchor. It's just doing a first ascent is much more involved, and it requires more like intimacy with the rock is the way that I put it. So you get a lot out of that. Personally, I get a lot out of it. Now, in terms of, whether we should give extra credit to first ascensionists, I see your point about some people will get into it as an ego thing. But the anecdote that came to mind is, when I did the first ascent of this climb down in Mexico, it was called Sendero Luminoso, which is Honnold went and soloed that line.
I remember that.
So, you bring up Alex Honnold as a superhuman climber, which for sure the dude is. But you know what he did? The first thing that he did after he soloed that line, maybe not the first thing, but early on, soon after, he called me up. Called me up and said, hey, even before he soloed it, he got in touch and said, "Hey, we're going through and we're pulling out cactus and we're brushing these holds off. And I just wanted to check with you. How do you feel about that?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, man, that's pretty cool. If Alex Honnold is doing that, then that acknowledgement feels good to the first ascensionist. And I think it really depends on the route. Alex Honnold felt like it was important and worthwhile. And just because he's a good dude and is connected with the history of climbing, he wanted to reach out to the people that did that route first out of respect and just out of just a good guy, good heart.
Yeah.
So there's a way to approach respecting the first ascent that I think is a positive way. Now, I don't think it's necessary to give that level of respect for some of the routes that I did at Reimers, for example, right? It's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I spent 20 days, Kurt Smith, Pete Peacock, Kevin Gallagher, and I went down and we developed this 2,000-foot route. We bolted it. We did it on lead. We hung out. We lived on that wall. We risked rockfall. We pioneered a line up a north wall in Mexico. It's the size of El Cap almost. If you do the whole thing, it's 3,000 feet. So that's a different kind of climb than a 25-foot route at Reimers. So when somebody calls me up and they're like, "Hey, can I add a bolt to Velcro Rodeo, some 12A that I put up on this wall?" Maybe it was you that called me up, but I'm like, of course, that is your rock. That is your area. We all own the rock. Nobody owns the rock. And equally important to the acknowledgement that you can give to a first ascensionist just because you respect that person or whatever is the first ascensionist acknowledging the fact that she doesn't own the rock. She doesn't have a special place. These are, these things were created. These are, God made that rock, and God came up with the sequence, the dance that we do to get up that rock. And as first ascensionists, we can influence that dance a little bit by where we choose to put protection and the line that we choose to take. And if the first ascensionist does a good job, if the first ascensionist has the eye, you and I understand what that is. It's the ability to look at a piece of stone after years of climbing and say, "Oh, it would be better if it traverses out to the right. And now in this section, we'll make it a little bit more run out, and it will enhance the experience and it will stick with, and the story will be a better story that's told." Sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong. And you're cursing me and you're like, what kind of crack is that dude smoking? Right. And in that case, we deserve the approbation that gets put on us, like we deserve all that cursing. So, when you pick up the drill or you pick up the sharp end of the rope and you cut out into virgin territory, it comes with a lot of responsibility and the acceptance that, whatever the crowd comes back with, well, you take it. If it's praise, then maybe you're entitled to that. If it's like you screwed up and you made a bad line, you also have to accept that as well. So it's a great question. I really think that it depends on, a lot depends on the individual and their reasons or motivations for doing it. I've always really, in the early days, it was about making run out, scary lines, and that was ego intensive.
Yeah.
But then as I matured as a climber and first ascensionist, I really enjoy making safe routes. If there's loose flakes that could come off and hurt somebody, I'll glue those flakes. It's all about safety. And it's secondarily about the experience for the climber. And so I think I've gotten better over the years at sort of figuring out what's going to provide a good experience. And then, what happens is as you mature as a first ascensionist, you see somebody come out, they get scared on your route, they fail on your route, and They don't say, wow, I was really scared and you're a really good climber. What they say is that route sucked.
Yeah.
You suck. But when they
Yeah.
go out and they have a great time and they succeed on your routes, they come back and they say 5 stars. Great route. Jeff Jackson is awesome. He's a master.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear. And so those are the routes that I try and create these days. I want people to have a good time.
I do see that. I definitely think, it's funny. So we talked about low hanging fruit, and I definitely was cursing you on that.
Yeah.
But I was also cursing you because like, I just did not understand how to link this thing together. And when I finally figured out the beta and putting it together and then doing it ground up, I was just like, this thing is like poetry. It is like a work of art. I really got to toot your horn on that route. Cause like I had no, like when you're on it and you just don't know what's going on. And it's such a unique piece of stone in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, right.
That's like the thing too. That's
like 8,000 feet up. And
yeah. But I forgot about that. That definitely has coming from Dallas to there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I literally flew in. I was there for in Denver for like maybe 24 hours. And then we drove up to Glenwood Springs, and then we were just hanging out in Glenwood Springs. And then just we went there. My favorite place to this day, hands down, is still the Frying Pan. And that place is just magical.
So yeah, man, I went up there. There was like just a few routes at that lower crag. Boy, what a gift.
I hope you guys are really enjoying this conversation. Jeff is an amazing person. It's really interesting to hear his growth through climbing, of how he was in the beginning and how he is now and everything. And guys, please make sure you follow him. He's actually developing, which we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but we will when we're meeting up again in the near future. He is developing so much on the island of Hawaii. It is unreal. And I cannot tell you how excited I am, because if you know Jex Jackson's roots, you can only bet your bottom dollar that it's gonna be good. But let's go ahead and get into this. I want to thank our sponsors for this episode, Organic Climbing and Beyond Clothing. Beyond Clothing makes clothing that is set up for anywhere in this big, beautiful globe that we live in. Their layering systems can get you anywhere and help you succeed at whatever you're trying to do. So if you guys haven't already, please check out Beyond Clothing. Whenever you get a chance, drop in a promo code, Sons and Suffers 20, and we will give you 20% off. That helps the podcast. That helps you get some fresh gear. Boom. All right. Let's get back to the show. I'm sorry. I'm giddy. I'm too excited. Dude, that place is like, it's a gem in the middle of nowhere, too. How did you find that? Actually, that's a really good question, because I know how I find routes, and I definitely want to show you a couple things that I found. But like, how in the world do you find some of these things? Because like the Frying Pan is a perfect example. Like you can barely see it from driving on the road. Like you barely even notice it. And that's like, you have to be looking for it. So how has it been people who show you these things?
Yeah, mostly it's locals that'll come through. BJ Sbarra, and I can't remember who first took me up to that crag. Josh. I'm spacing his last name, but we climbed it I climbed with some locals. I moved to Carbondale in 2007, was it? I can't remember. Kai, my oldest, was born in 2007. We must have moved there 2005, and I was there from 2005 to 2015 editing.
Okay.
Rock and Ice, and amazingly enough, there's very little really developed climbing in the Carbondale area, but despite having Climbing Magazine and Rock and Ice, the two biggest climbing magazines in the U.S., there's very little developed climbing there. One, those guys at the climbing magazines, they work their asses off, as I soon found out. But the other reason, who knows why? Motivation is a big part of it. People raising families and working really hard, that's another part of it.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to get in there and have somebody like BJ. He has a website, Splitter Choss, kind of a great website too. I'll plug BJ's site, and the folks in Carbondale, that sort of pointed me in that direction. And then I got up to the crag, and I just kind of went wild. Every spare moment that I had, I would head up there, and I had a good paying job. I was editing, had no kids. It was 25 minutes away, 30-minute hike. And I just went ape shit up there and bolted
I
a
can
ton
tell.
of routes. And it's just gorgeous. If, for your listeners, if you head to the town of Basalt and go check out you can check it out in a guidebook called, Western Sloper, I think.
Yep.
It's the guidebook to the Western Slope. And this area is a gem. It takes some effort to get to it, but there's maybe a couple hundred routes on the most splitter sandstone. That's kind of a combination of El Dorado Canyon and Mill Creek in Utah. Just very interesting, unique sequences. Hard to read, but beautiful, beautiful climbing.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah,
bolted and mixed.
Yeah, I went there. Will had given me the advice to go there, and I was there to I was training there to hopefully, which I didn't end up sending it, but I was using a lot of your routes there to try to do the Velvet Tongue in Black Velvet Canyon in Vegas, which that place, like that, because right where the hardest parts get in that canyon, the stone is almost identical.
Really,
which is really interesting. It's like there's this weird band, like around 900 feet up, and it's just this massive band that just seems really glassy and polished, but it just gets so thin and it's so delicate, and you just have to. This is where like all this yoga and all this stuff pops into my mind. I was like literally thinking in my mind, I was like, I need to be better at just like holding this position, balancing, and putting this micro TCU in and trying to just be able to move. And when I saw that area, I was just like, this is exactly like this thing. And so
that's true.
I just went ape shit. I just went ape shit up there. Like, as you said, just trying to get better at that.
Yeah. It's a good place to train for Red Rocks. Yeah, I went with my buddy, Patrick O'Donnell. He's a Bishop guy, another Austinite that I met in Austin, and we did the Rainbow Wall up there, and I really felt like climbing at the Frying Pan was helpful for ascending.
Yeah. So you have definitely named a lot of people, and you kind of have it sparked this idea, and I've been wanting to do this series, and I would definitely like to, if you have time in the future, kind of recruit your help on this, but I want to do a series called Texas's Gift to Rock Climbing, AKA You're Welcome America, because like almost everywhere I've ever gone, I hear stories of Texans just coming up and just being prolific in climbing everywhere. And
Leighton
I feel
Leighton Core. I don't know if you knew he was.
I don't know that name.
Yeah, Leighton is he's old school master.
Yeah. And so I feel like there was such a small, as you said, like there was basically Enchanted Rock, and there was right in the Wichita's. Oh my God, it just escaped my brain.
Quartz.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that place.
Me too.
It's basically Wichita's and Quartz, and I feel like whatever crew, I think from what I understand, about realistically two, barely three, but realistically 2 generations came out of there and then just exploded across the country. Because you have the original diehards that were just, 1 or 2 dudes just doing it. And then they built a crew, and then those people built a crew. And then from that moment on, it exploded. And then rock climbing picked up popularity in general.
Right.
And then that's it. But from once those, and I think honestly, the introduction of the internet, more magazines, things like that, definitely kind of helped the expansion of this process too. Yeah. But I've always been so curious, and I just have this super strong hunch that like, if you were to take away every Texan that has ever bolted or done anything, there would be a lot of sad climbers immediately. Like imagine like
there'd be a big hole in the heart of rock climbing.
Yeah, it'd be huge.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So it's just the thought that just popped in my mind, and I've been like wanting to rattle around with it for a while. And you're naming these people, and I'm like, okay, yes, this is definitely
Rapesh, Chuggin, Clayton Reagan, those are Dallas guys, and they still, that was the generation after me and Dwayne, and and Jack Molesky, you
Mhm.
know, and then Clayton and Rapesh Chuggin, those guys, Dallas area guys, and they still have some of the hardest routes in America. You know, I bought a piece of land on a place called Flat Creek that's outside of Austin, and it's private, but it's still some folks still climb there, and you know, beautiful area, completely closed, but there are, you know, people, visitors like Jonathan Segrist, and I can't remember the guy's name is escaping me, but he just did a 515 there, you know, repeated
Mhm.
a route that Rapesh and Clayton did. Like Rapesh, I think, did the first ascent IME mine, maybe it was called. And
Yeah, I
Nick
know that.
Dunnell came back, and you know, there's like 9 A's, 9 A pluses that are out there in Texas, and these guys are operating in a vacuum. You know, it's just insane how good they are.
Yeah.
You know, there's something there. Like I'm nothing, but I bolt a lot of lines, but those guys are real deal.
Yeah, they're
You know,
monsters. Yeah, and so I've always said this for a long time, but I think Texas has some of the best sport climbing in the country. It's just there's so much private land. And
yeah, yeah,
that's the
that's
thing
tough.
that like drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
And I have been traveling and I found some gorgeous stuff that I want to show you later. But it's one of those things where it's like the hardest thing I've dealt with is me walking up to landowners.
Yeah.
And like I'm out on these properties just walking up to landowners. And National Geographic, don't hate me for saying this, but I literally wear a t-shirt that says National Geographic photographer so they don't shoot me.
Yeah,
Because,
well, right. Yeah.
Because, it like,
You got
one,
your dreads, you know.
yeah, I mean, just being blank, being a brother in the middle of like 700 miles on
Exactly.
some rancher's property, he thinks I'm probably trying to steal his cattle. And
Who
I'm like out
knows,
there
you
with
know?
a camera and I'm just taking photos. And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, is my ranch going to be in there? I was like, maybe, maybe. I don't know.
You're right.
And I'm probably, hopefully
I'm
they
going to
don't
need to
listen to
take
podcasts.
these ropes and rappel down your cliffs first to see if the endangered species that I'm going to report on is okay. And
Yeah.
he comes back, there's like shiny bolts up. You know? This is just for Nat Geo now.
Yeah. And, but it's just the reality of it is, and just walking around. So,
Boy, I know, bro. It's like getting like
how did you
shot
guys
at.
deal with that? I've heard stories.
Yeah.
I've heard the stories of you guys having like people taking 22s and hopefully no one ever shot a 308 at you.
Oh God, man. You know, I've had shotgun blasts into the wall next to me, you know, where I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? And I'll be down in a second. Boom. You'll get down now, boy. And yeah, that kind of stuff. Cleaver,
Cool.
you know, the chism.
Oh yeah.
Whatever y'all call it now. I don't know.
It's the burn.
The burn. Still the burn.
It's
That's
still
what
the
we call it.
burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, the burn. Access has changed to that now.
Oh, good.
Actually, there's a zone that was opening up, but I think the last great rain that we had came through, like really just like destroyed a big possible trail that went through.
Okay.
And there is, I started working on this project, but like a friend of mine who's really spearheading and I was helping him. There's like one landowner that we just need to get permission to cross literally like 20 feet of his property.
Oh, yeah.
And then you'll have access to it.
Wow, cool.
But like the guy's just like not having it.
Well, that area is a really interesting area. You know, that was, I did a route in like maybe 83, 80. I graduated high school in 82. It must have been 82. And I think it's like 13B, something like that.
Are you?
And so
not
Dwayne,
Mariner?
the Mariner was later.
Okay.
Yep. And this was called Lizard King.
Oh yeah, I know this route.
Yeah. And Dwayne and Jack, those guys were really spearheaded a lot of the development there,
Mhm.
and a lot of the 513s. And Dwayne pointed out to me not too long ago that those were probably among the first 513 limestone 513s for sure, and among the first 513s around.
Probably.
You know, sport climbing.
The
82,
oldest,
81.
yeah, because the only 513 I ever know that's like supposedly earlier, that is in City of Rocks
Yeah.
in Idaho.
Sure, they're out there.
But
Just interesting.
yeah, just think about it. 'Cause
So,
like,
you know, your point about Texans and Texas being a sort of a this kind of
Low key.
world in its own, low key sort of place where a lot was going on and a lot has always gone on. Point taken, it actually was.
Yeah.
We were motivated at the time. And we were also removed a bit from the ethical and stylistic constraints that other American climbers were putting on themselves in the epicenters of climbing, like Yosemite and Eldo and places where people were climbing. Were still really preoccupied with style, ground up, no hang dogging. You'd fall, you would have to lower, you couldn't work above. And we went and we attempted to apply these things to 30, 40 foot pocketed limestone climbs, and the result was like broken ankles and horrible heel injuries, and hooks were popping. And eventually, thanks to Dwayne and Jack, I got over this idea that we can only do it this way because Backer and John Backer and Rod Kalkin, those our gods, said it. There actually were no stone tablets where these commandments were written down. Those guys clued me into that.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, oh, you guys can't be up there hang dogging and like so many things with Dwayne and Jack and my mentors. They really helped me to see, wait, we can explore boundaries in a safe way, and we can experiment. And
how hard is that to get over? Because I know my mentors, like Mark Pell, when teaching me how to trad climb, and then Rob Kenderson, definitely Kenzie Davis and a few other people. But Mark is probably the person who really spearheaded to me. And I remember just arguing with him, tooth and nail hair. And he was like, you don't hang on your trad gear. I'm like, well, he's like, and you don't fall on your gear. I'm like, then what's it for?
Right.
And he was
don't
like,
fall. The leader does not fall, right?
Yeah. And I was like, well, what's it for then? I'm like, I was like, how am I supposed to push boundaries? And then you mentioned track and field. I was an 800 meter runner.
Oh, wow.
And then so I ran open 8 and open 8 and 300 meter hurdles were my main event.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I like suffering quite a bit. Like I enjoy it.
Right. You must. 800 meter is the event, bro.
Oh,
that's a rough one.
I threw up almost every time I ran that event. And anyone who I tell that to has not run track and field, they're like, that's so disgusting. But anyone who's run track, you're like, yeah, that's par for the course.
God, it's so rough.
Did you see, I cannot remember her name, this woman from Dallas that just set the record and is going to Tokyo?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll show you this race after this. But her story about wanting to try and be the best. And she's like, I don't have time. I only have a finite amount of time in my life to be the best. So I'm just going to go for it now. Because everyone else was telling me, well, you're young. You should do this. You should do this. And I guess this kind of boils into what we're talking about. But how was that for you? I know for me, I'm stubborn and I argued, but I do have these humbling moments. But do you remember that moment of this humbling moment of well, I guess this is was it more of a practical thing? Oh, I get to rock climb more. Or was it well, my mentors are saying this, so I should do this?
It's interesting, man. I think it's really it can be really difficult to buck the paradigm, buck the rules, whether it's in your choices in life in general, the way that you look, going against the norm is always difficult. And in climbing, at the time, the only thing that I knew was what was written in the magazines, which is I really learned to climb from reading books and reading the magazines. And that's why when I became an editor, I was stoked. I felt like I was doing something kind of important because I got all of the rules and all of the definition of what it is to be a climber from those magazines. Being in the outback, sort of backwoods country sort of area of Texas, the boonies, so to speak, of rock climbing, that was the only way that I got that. And so when Dwayne and Jack came from the Gunks, Jack Molesky, and he was
I did not know that.
Yeah, Jack was a prolific first ascensionist. Him and Jeff Gruenberg partnered up to put up some of the hardest climbs in America at the time in the Shawangunks.
I always thought his story started here in Texas.
No, he was a well-known prolific climber. And So when those guys came to me in the flesh, then they became, instead of the climbing magazines and the books, I started to see, okay, this is how it's done. And those guys really taught me, not only how to climb, but how to live, what to wear, what to eat, what to do. That's what your mentors do. They tell you
Yeah.
how to be. And so at first I was really resistant to what I saw them doing, but then I quickly realized just through common sense that, okay, this is how we're going to progress. This is
Yeah.
how we're going to explore and get deeper into this practice, this discipline, or this lifestyle, is through what they're showing. So it was pretty quick. First
Yeah.
time I saw him kind of strapped up under a roof and like practicing moves and hang dogging and whatever else dark arts that they were practicing, I was just horrified. And then I was like, well, damn, they can climb really hard and they're having a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
every time I fall on this move, I have to lower to the ground. It kind of seems like bullshit. Let's do what they're doing. And
Yeah.
then we formed a bond. And Dwayne is still, my best friend, my brother. He's still my mentor and just means so much to me. And Jack, of course, was murdered.
Yeah.
His girlfriend murdered him in Colorado Springs 20 years ago, a long time
that was
ago.
a tragic story.
Yeah.
It's very tragic.
Yeah, it's a big loss.
Yeah, I remember talking to my buddy Kenzie Davis about that, and he remembers that because he remembers seeing Jimmy Forrester being really devastated by that happening.
Right.
And then when Jimmy passed, that was like I didn't realize how so when Jimmy Forrester passed, I think I truly was just like really stepping into my own in the climbing community because I didn't realize I had met him, but just in passing at climbing at Carrollton at the old exposure gym.
Right.
And like, that's it. But like, there was a definite low in the community when that happened. It was a big deal.
That's another name that we should mention, Jimmy Ray Forrester, and then Marcus Garcia, Jimmy's partner. Those guys were they were a generation behind me and Jack and Dwayne. And they also elevated the sport quite a bit.
Yeah.
Jimmy Ray was a staunch traditionalist who lived that old school style till the end.
Yeah.
He died soloing in Churro Chico just to let folks
common.
know.
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, climbing, and for those of you guys listening, life is life. Death is a reality for all of us. The only thing that is true is death and taxes. And so
hear that.
But I do want, and I'm only saying this because I know the kids that I coach listen to this podcast and the parents that I coach. Obviously, practice safely to the best of your abilities. That's why we talk about bolting routes in a safe, fun manner. We want you to come down and talk to us about the route. But life is life. We're not going to sugarcoat this, nor am I going to sugarcoat the reality of like what happens. Bad things happen to people sometimes, and bad things happen to good people. And hopefully that won't happen to anybody we know, and it all happens of natural causes. But it is what it is.
That's right. It is what it is. We do what we can do with following the fundamentals of always backing up and having safe anchors and practicing down climbing and everything that you can do. And look, I look back at some of the close scrapes I've had, but I realize that it's through the practice of safe climbing that I've been doing this since 77. It's the reason that I'm still. So climb safely for sure. Most important thing.
It's so funny because I listen to you talking, and now I imagine the kids that I coach talking, and they talk about like climbs and things that I've done and places that I've gone, and it's just like, it's funny because like I see how they see me through how I see you, and it's like this wealth of knowledge just opens up, and I'm like super, 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 super grateful for it. And I want to give you an opportunity I want to kind of wrap this up here, but I want to give you kind of an opportunity. I say give someone a shout out. I always say that, but you've mentioned more names than I can imagine right now. And I definitely want to talk to those. But a question that I've been recently asking a lot is there, and it doesn't have to be related to climbing, but is there a book or something that you have gifted someone? A book, sorry. Is there a book or a book you like to read? And I always use the term gifted someone or gifted people that has just been important to you. Like one of my favorite books is The Sweet Spot, How to Find Your Groove and at Home at Work. It has nothing to do with climbing.
Yeah.
But what it does allows you to do is realize how to simplify and automate a lot of things in your life so you can prioritize climbing if that's really what you want, or prioritize your kids, your whatever's important to you. But I think that's like something, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the gift of giving some form of literature, or giving something that someone can take is like really underutilized nowadays.
I do too, man. Well, it makes me think of immediately of something that's just been fundamental in my life since the early 80s when I went to college. I went to Dartmouth in New Hampshire, and I studied, one of the first courses that I took was a religion course, a survey of religion, and taught by a guy, Ronald Green, he's like an advisor to many presidents on ethical matters and stuff. And so great professor, just an amazing dude. And at a certain point, we studied Buddhism.
Okay.
And it just like everything clicked for me. I immediately was just like, wow, this philosophy, it's not really a religion. It's more a practice of being present. And it all kind of made sense. And there's no proselytizing. You could be a Christian and be a Buddhist. It's not that kind of thing. And it clicked for me. And the book that I read and the form of Buddhism that resonated the most was Zen Buddhism. And I've studied and practiced Zen sitting meditation since the early 80s. It's been super profound. And the one book that I would recommend to climbers is that classic Zen and the Art of Archery.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, really interesting.
Classic Zen and the Art of Archery.
It's just called Zen and the Art of Archery.
Zen and the Art of Archery.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a super interesting book because it takes this, sport or whatever you want to call archery, target shooting with a bow and arrow, and it analyzes it in terms of the practice of Zen.
That's dope.
It's dope. It's cool. It's a cool book.
Yeah.
Cool book.
Okay. I did not see that one. Okay. That's cool. I'm into this. All right.
Yeah.
Amazon tomorrow.
Yeah. Zen and the Art of Archery. Real thin little book. And when I read that book, I was like, wow, this has applications to everything you do, from washing the dishes to your climbing practice.
Wow.
Because, climbing is
it's practice.
It's a practice.
It is.
Really is.
No, like I always tell people, climbing is a practice in a relationship. And like my clients that like skip out on climbing for a long time, they're like, man, I come back to climbing. It's so hard. I'm like, climbing is like a dating relationship. You ignore your significant other for a while, you're going to pay the price.
Yeah, that's
when
right.
You come back. And climbing's the same way.
Right.
Like I'm almost everybody coming out, and we all know this feeling, but everybody coming out of quarantine was just like, oh, this is real hard again. For the people who were lucky enough to have home gyms, home walls, or have a crag in their backyard, different story.
Right. But, dude, yeah. So your project it's like a dysfunctional relationship. You look lovingly at it, you study it, you hang baubles on it, you clean it up, you brush it, you pay attention to it. When you're not with it, you think about it. When you're with it, it rejects you over and over and over again.
God.
And then one day you finally do the project, and then you come down and you're like, oh, what's next? What's the next relationship?
It's been fun, but we're done. Oh my God. Well, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you. And I look forward to having the opportunity to continue to talk to you and hopefully walk parallel with you in your journey every once in a while.
Definitely, man. Thank you. Thanks for giving me a platform to talk about my favorite thing, climbing. Yeah.
Amen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. I hope you have enjoyed this show. I'm cheesing so much. I hope you can hear it in my voice. I love this man. I have chased after this man's routes most of my life. Him and Jeremy Collins are probably the two most prolific route developers I've ever met in my life. And I love the beauty and the synergy that they find with climbing and the rock and everything that they do. It's just gorgeous. But as always, I appreciate you guys following, subscribing, and sharing these episodes. And remember, if you're not suffering, are you really even sending at all?
Drug Tone Audio.